Chapter 8 Municipal Bonds, Local Government Securities. In this chapter, understanding municipal bond basics, comparing general obligation bonds to revenue bonds, reviewing other types of municipal bonds, following the rules, recognizing sources of municipal bond information. Municipal bonds are securities that state governments, local governments, or U.S. territories issue. The municipality uses the money it borrows from investors to fund and support projects such as roads, sewer systems, hospitals, and so on. In most cases, the interest received from these bonds is federally tax-free to investors. Even though you're most likely going to spend a majority of your time selling equity security stocks, for some unknown reason, the Series 7 tests heavily on municipal securities. As a matter of fact, municipal bonds are one of the most heavily tested areas on the entire exam. If you flipped ahead, you may have noticed that this chapter isn't one of the biggest in this audiobook. Why is that? Well, I cover a lot of the bond basics such as par value, maturity, types of maturities, term, serial, and balloon, the seesaw, and so on in the last chapter, chapter 7. Also, you will find some of the underwriting information in chapter 5. As with some of the other chapters, you'll find some overlap between what you learn when taking the SIE exam and what's covered in this chapter related to municipal securities. This chapter in the real exam focused mainly on the differences between government and general obligation bonds and revenue bonds. I also give you plenty of example questions for practice, plus a chapter test at the end to wrap it all up. General obligation bonds. Backing bonds with taxes. Most Series 7 municipal test questions are on general obligation bonds. The following sections help you prepare. In general characteristics of GOs. When you're preparing to take the Series 7 exam, you need to recognize and remember a few items that are specific to GO bonds. They fund non-revenue producing facilities. GO bonds are not self-supporting because municipalities issue them to build or support projects that don't bring in enough or any money to help pay off the bonds. GOs fund schools, libraries, police departments, fire stations, etc. They're backed by the full faith and credit taxing power of the municipality. The taxes of the people living in the municipality back general obligation bonds. They require voter approval. Because the generous taxes of the people living in the municipality and back the bonds, those same people had the right to vote on the project. The following question tests your knowledge of general obligation or GO bonds. Which of the following projects are more likely to be financed by general obligation bonds than revenue bonds? 1. New municipal hospital. 2. Public sports arena. 3. new junior high school. 4. New library. A. 1 and 2 only. B. 3 and 4 only. C. 1 and 3 only. Or D. 1, 3, and 4 only. The correct answer is choice B. Remember that GO bonds are issued to fund non-revenue producing projects. A new municipal hospital and a public sports arena will produce income that can back revenue bonds. However, a new junior high school and a new library need the support of taxes to pay off the bonds and therefore are more likely to be financed by GO bonds. Analyzing GO bonds. The Series 7 exam tests your ability to analyze different types of municipal securities and help a customer make a decision that best suits their needs. You should be able to analyze a GO bond like you analyze other investments. However, because they're backed by taxes rather than sales of goods and services like most corporations are, GO bonds have different components to look at when analyzing the marketability and safety of the issue. Ascertaining marketability. Many different items can affect the marketability of municipal bonds, including the characteristics of the issuer, the factors affecting the issuer's ability to pay, and municipal debt ratios. You certainly want to steer investors away from municipal bonds that aren't very marketable, unless these investors are willing to take extra risk. Here's a list of some of the other items that can affect the bond's marketability. Quality rating. The higher the credit rating, the safer the bond, and therefore the more marketable it is. Maturity. The shorter the maturity, the more marketable the bond issue. Call features. Callable bonds are less marketable than non-callable bonds. Interest coupon rate. Everything else being somewhat equal, bonds with higher coupon or interest rates are more marketable. Block size. The larger the block size, the more marketable the bond usually is. Dollar price. All else being equal, the lower the dollar price, the more marketable the bond is. Issuer's name. Local or national reputation. Bonds are more marketable when the issuer has a good reputation for paying off his bonds on time. Also, if they have a national instead of just local reputation for paying their debt on time, the debt securities will be more marketable. Liquidity. Able to sell the bond in a secondary market. Certainly there are a lot of things that can affect the liquidity. Ease of selling the security of municipal bonds. Investors would have to look at the issuer's name, national interest, the rating of the bonds, the coupon rate, dollar price, maturity, and so on. Credit and liquidity support. Municipal securities issued with credit and liquidity support have a bank-issued letter of credit committed to payment of principal and interest in the event that the municipal issuer is unable to do so. Obviously, this adds another level of safety, and the issuer would be able to issue securities back with some credit and liquidity support with lower yields. Denominations. Unlike corporate bonds, municipal bonds typically have a minimum denomination of $5,000, and some even impose a higher denomination of $100,000. A Certainly, municipal bonds with denomination of $5,000 face value will be affordable to many more investors. Sinking fund. If the issuer has put money aside to pay the bonds off at maturity, the bonds are more marketable because the default risk is lower. Insurance. The bonds are insured against default. They're considered very safe and are much more marketable. And bond insurance. Bond insurance is considered a credit enhancement. There are many factors that can affect the marketability of municipal bonds. The SEC is now requiring issuers to update the MSRB when material changes take place that could affect the marketability of their municipal securities. All material changes must be disclosed within 10 days of the occurrence of the event. The information will be made available to investors and industry professionals of the MSRB's EMA internet site. The events that must be disclosed include municipal and interest payment delinquencies on the securities being offered, unscheduled draws on debt service reserves, unscheduled draws on credit enhancement, substitution of credit or liquidity providers, deficiencies, rating changes, tender offers, bankruptcy, adverse tax opinions that might make the issue taxable, and non-payment related defaults. Bond calls. Dealing with debt. One factor that influences the safety of a GO bond is the municipality's ability to deal with debt. After you consider the issuer's name, you can look at the previous issues that the municipality had and find out whether it was able to pay off the debt in a timely manner. In addition to the municipality's name and credit history, you want to look at its current debt. Net overall debt includes the debt that the municipality owes directly plus the portion of the overlapping debt that the municipality is responsible for. Net direct debt. The debt that the municipality obtained on its own. Net direct debt comes from both GO bonds on short-term municipal notes. Revenue bonds are not included in the net direct debt because they're self-supportive. Overlapping debt. Overlapping debt occurs when several authorities in a geographic area have the ability to tax the same residents. Take, for example, our previous home away from home, Las Vegas. Not only does Las Vegas have its own debt, but because it's part of Clark County, the Las Vegas residents are also responsible for part of Clark County's debt. In addition, because Las Vegas is in Nevada, the residents of Las Vegas are responsible for the portion of Nevada's debt. To determine the debt per capita per person, take the debt overall, direct or overlapping, and divide it by the number of people in the municipality. Obviously, for an investor, the lower the number is, the better. Bringing in taxes, fees, and fines. Taxes, one of life's little certainties, and another factor that influences the safety of GO bonds. Property taxes, which local municipalities, not states, collect, and sales taxes are the driving force behind paying back investors. aided and abetted by traffic fines and licensing fees. Taxes put money in the municipal coffers and eventually in the investors' hands. The following factors come into play. Property values. Ad valorem property taxes are the largest source of backing for gold bonds. Even when people living in a municipality want the property values to be low, not if they're selling their home, but for tax purposes. People investing in municipal bonds want the property values to be high. The higher the assessed value, the more taxes collected and the easier it is for the municipality to pay off its debt. And you're dealing with a series of questions that ask you to calculate the ad valorem taxes for an individual. Always go with the assessed value, not the market value. Ad valorem taxes are based on mills or thousands of a dollar. To help you remember that a mill equals .001, remember that mills has two L's. So you need to have 2 zeros after the decimal point. Population. Obviously, the more people who live in a municipality and pay taxes to back the bond issue, the better. Also, the population trend is important. Investors prefer to see more people moving into a municipality than moving out. Tax base. Tax base is comprised of the number of people living in a municipality, the assessed property values, and how much the average person makes. Larger tax bases are ideal to help support municipal gold bonds. Taxes per capita. Because sales taxes also support gold bonds, the amount of sales per capita, the amount of goods the average person buys is also important. And traffic fines and licensing fees. You know that $200 speeding ticket that you got last month? The money that you paid in fines helped to pay off some of the municipalities' debt. Hope that makes you feel better. Municipal gold bonds are backed by the huge taxing power of a municipality, so gold bonds usually have higher ratings and lower yields than revenue bonds. Because investors aren't taking as much risk, they don't get as much reward or yield. Try your hand at a question involving property taxes, an issue that affects the safety of gold bonds. An individual has a house with a market value of $350,000 and an assessed value of $300,000. What is the ad valorem tax if the tax rate is 24 mils? A. $720. B. $840. C. $7,200. Or D. $8,400. The answer you want is choice C. First, make sure that you start off with the assessed value, multiply it by the tax rate, and then by .001 to get the answer. 300,000 times 24 times .001 equals $7,200. To keep yourself from making a careless mistake, multiply the three numbers separately. A tax rate may be single or double digits. Multiplying by .001 means moving the decimal point 3 places to the left. So 24 mils is .024 not $0.0024. In this case, if you multiply $300,000 by 0.0024 or 2.4 mils, you got a wrong answer. Choice A. Although some of you might be lucky enough to live in a municipality where you only pay $720 per year in property taxes in states like New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and so on, most of us pay more than that per month. Bank qualified bonds. Certain issues of gold bonds are considered bank qualified when municipal bonds are purchased on margin. Interest expenses associated with purchasing securities are not tax deductible even in the case of municipal bonds. However, if the municipal bonds are bank qualified, banks can purchase the municipal bonds on margin and deduct 80% of the margin interest expense on their taxes while still receiving tax-free interest from the municipal bonds. Unfortunately, this big advantage isn't available to investors like you and me. Revenue bonds. Raising money for utilities and such. Unlike the tax-backed gold bonds, revenue bonds are issued to fund municipal facilities that generate enough revenue to income to support the bonds. These bonds raise money for certain utilities, toll roads, airports, hospitals, student loans, and so on. A municipality can also issue industrial development revenue bonds, or IDRs, to finance the construction of facilities for corporations that move into that municipality. Remember that even though a municipality issues IDRs, they're actually backed by lease payments made by a corporation. Because the corporation is backing the bonds, the credit rating of the bonds is derived from the credit rating of the corporation. Because IDRs are backed by a corporation rather than a municipality, IDRs are generally considered the riskiest municipal bonds. Additionally, because these bonds are issued for the benefit of a corporation and not the municipality, the interest income may not be federally tax-free to investors subject to the alternative minimum tax. General characteristics of revenue bonds. Before taking the Series 7 exam, you need to recognize and remember a couple of items that are specific to revenue bonds. They don't need voter approval because revenue bonds fund the revenue producing facility and therefore aren't backed by taxes. They don't require voter approval. The revenues that the facility generates should be sufficient to pay off the debt. They require a feasibility study. Prior to issuing revenue bonds, the municipality hires consultants to prepare a feasibility study. The study basically answers the question, does this make sense? The study includes estimates of revenues that the facility could generate, along with any economic, operating, or engineering aspects of the project that would be of interest to the municipality. Analyzing revenue bonds. As with any investment, you need to check out the specifics of the security. For instance, when gauging the safety of a revenue bond, you want to see whether it has a credit enhancement insurance, which provides a certain degree of safety. You also want to look at self-call features, whether the issuer has the right to force investors to redeem their bonds early. You can assume that if a bond is callable, it has a higher yield than a non-callable bond because the investor is taking more risk. The investor doesn't know how long she can hold on to the bond. For Series 7 exam purposes, and if you ever sell one or more revenue bonds, you also need to be familiar with the revenue bond specific items in this section. For instance, municipal revenue bonds involve covenants, wonderful little promises that protect investors by holding the issuer legally accountable. Next, I'll tell you about some of the promises that municipalities make on a municipal bond income. Revenue bond covenants. Going by type of covenant and promises that the municipality will. Rate covenant. Charge sufficient fees to people using the facility to be able to pay expenses and the debt service, principal and interest on the bonds. Maintenance covenant. Adequately take care of the facility and any equipment so the facility continues to earn revenue. Insurance covenant. Adequately insure the facility. If you see the word covenant on the Series 7 exam, immediately think of revenue bonds. Other factors that provide investors with a certain degree of comfort are the municipalities that provide financial reports and are subject to outside audits for all their revenue bond issues. Obviously, municipalities don't want to default on their loans. That's why issuers use the additional bonds test, which says that if the municipality is going to issue more bonds backed by the same project, it must prove that the revenues will be sufficient to cover all the bonds. The indenture on the initial bond may be open-ended or closed-ended. If it's open-ended, additional bonds will have equal claims to the assets. If it's closed-ended, any other bonds issued are subordinate to, in other words, rank lower than the original issuer. As with Go bonds, revenue bonds are often backed by credit enhancements or insurance, which will pay the investors in the event that the issuer defaults. Since revenue bonds are backed by a revenue-producing facility, most revenue issuers also carry catastrophe insurance. A catastrophe clause states that if the facility is destroyed due to a catastrophic event such as a flood, hurricane, tornado, or the like, the municipality will use the insurance that is purchased to call the bonds and pay back the bondholders. The flow of funds relates only to revenue bonds. The flow of funds tells you that a municipality does with the money collected from the revenue producing facility that's backing the bonds. Typically, the flow of bonds is as follows. Operation and maintenance. This item is normally the first that the municipality pays from revenues it receives. If the municipality doesn't adequately maintain the facility and pay its employees, it'll cease to run. Debt service. Usually the next item paid after operation and maintenance is the debt service, principal and interest on the bonds. Debt service reserve. After paying the first two items, the municipality puts aside money into the debt service reserve to pay 1 year's debt service. Reserve maintenance fund. This fund helps supplement the general maintenance fund. Renewal and replacement fund. This fund is for exactly what you would expect: renewal projects, updating and modernizing, and replacement of equipment. Surplus fund. Municipalities can use this fund for several purposes, such as redeeming bonds, paying for improvements, and so on. Revenues are normally dispersed, as I described in the preceding list. This system is called a net revenue pledge because the net revenues, gross revenues minus operation and maintenance, are used to pay the debt service. However, if the municipality pays the debt service before paying the operation maintenance, it's called a gross revenue pledge. The debt service coverage ratio is an indication of the ability of a municipal issuer to meet the debt service payments on its bonds. The higher the debt service coverage ratio, the more likely the issuer is to be able to meet interest and principal payments on time. The following question tests your debt service coverage ratio knowledge. Use the following formula to answer it. Debt service coverage ratio equals net of gross revenues divided by principal plus interest. A municipality generates $10 million in revenues from a facility. It must pay off $6 million in operating and maintenance expenses, $1.5 million on principal, and $500,000 in interest. Under a net revenue pledge, what is the debt service coverage ratio? A, 1 to 1. B, 1.5 to 1. C, 2 to 1. D, 4 to 1. The right answer is choice C. Because the question states that the municipality is using a net revenue pledge, you have to calculate the net revenue. First, using the earlier equation, figure the revenue by subtracting the operation and maintenance expenses, $6 million, from the gross revenue, $10 million, which gives you $4 million. Next, take the $4 million and divide it by the combined principal and interest. The principal is $1.5 million and the interest is $500,000, which gives you a total of $2 million. After dividing the $4 million by the $2 million, you come up with a ratio of 2 to 1, which means that the municipality brought in 2 times the amount of money needed to pay the debt service, principal, and interest. The debt service coverage ratio of 2 to 1 is considered adequate for a municipality to pay off its debt. A debt service coverage ratio is less than 2 to 1 of less than 2 to 1 may indicate that the municipality may have problem meeting its debt obligations. Here's how your equation should look. If you write it down, but here's how you figure it. Listen here. Debt service coverage ratio. Net revenues divided by principal plus interest. Debt service coverage ratio equals $10 million minus $6 million divided by $1.5 million plus $500,000, which equals $4 million divided by $2 million, which equals 2 to 1. If the question doesn't specifically ask for the gross revenues or net revenues, you can assume net because that's the more common way to say a municipality pays off its debt. The primary market. Bringing new municipal bonds to the market. As you may imagine, like corporations and partnerships, municipalities need help selling their issues. To that end, they can choose their underwriters directly the way almost all corporations and DPPs do it, or through a competitive bidding process. Note, whether the new municipal securities are being sold via a competitive or negotiated offering, the SEC requires that the underwriter make sure that the issuer, state or local government, enters into an agreement to provide required information to the Municipalities Securities Rulemaking Board, or MSRB. The information required includes annual financial information such as operating data and audited financial statements. In addition, the issuer must provide event notices such as principal and interest payment delinquencies, bond calls or tender offers, ratings changes, unscheduled draws on debt service reserves, bankruptcy, appointment of a successor trustee, defeasances, and so on. Issuers must submit annual disclosures on or before the date specified in the continuing disclosure agreement, or provide a notice of a failure to do so via electronic municipal access website, or EMA. Issuers are exempt from providing continuing disclosure if the entire issue is less than $1 million, with a bond sold to no more than 35 unaccredited sophisticated investors and sold in units of no less than $100,000, where the bonds are sold in denominations of $100,000 or more and mature in 9 months or less from initial issuance. The bonds were issued prior to July 1995. Negotiated offering. This is the type of offering where the issuer chooses the underwriters. A group of underwriters is called a syndicate, directly with no competition from other underwriters. Municipalities issuing revenue bonds or IDRs typically choose the underwriters directly, although they have the option of taking bids. Like most corporations, quite often the municipality will already have a relationship with one or more underwriters that it is comfortable working with. Since revenue bonds are not backed by taxing power like GOs, the issuers are not obligated to get the best price or coupon rate for their bond issue. Competitive offering. Because general obligation bonds are backed by the taxing power of the municipality, the municipal issuers are responsible for getting the best deal for the people living in their municipality. In order to ensure the best deal, they will post an advertisement known as a notice of sale in the daily bond buyer, the main source of information about new municipal bonds, saying that they are accepting bids on a new issue of bonds. At this point, interested underwriters will submit a good faith deposit to prove their sincerity and their bids to the issuer. As you may suspect, the winner of the bid would be the underwriter that presents the lowest cost to the taxpayers backing the bond. The lowest cost could be the result of issuing a bond with the lower coupon rate and or agreeing to pay more to purchase the bonds. Don't be too concerned about the underwriters who don't win. They'll get their good faith deposit back. The notice of sale contains all bidding information about new municipal issues. Besides just saying that it is taking bids, the issuer also gives bidding details. It will tell municipal underwriters where to submit bids, the amount of good faith deposit, whether it is expecting bids on an NIC, net interest cost, or a TIC, true interest cost basis, the amount of bonds to be issued, the maturity of bonds to be issued, etc. It is the responsibility of the underwriters to determine the coupon rate. They'll determine this based on the credit history of the issuer, the amount of outstanding debt, the size of the issue, the tax base, and so on. The selling price of the issue. Remember, the underwriters need to be able to sell the issue and still make a profit. So the selling price and the coupon rate have to be attractive to investors. You should remember that the difference between the cost that the issuer pays and the security the issuer pays for the security and the amount it receives from investors is called a spread. For argument's sake, say that the underwriters agree to purchase the bonds for $990 each from the issuer and then re-offer them to the public for $1,000 each. Then the spread is $10 per bond. The underwriter profit lies within that profit or spread. The underwriter's profit lies within that spread. Private offering. A private offering of municipal securities is a primary offering new issues where a placement agreement, municipal securities dealer acting as an agent, sells the new securities directly to the public on an agreement basis. In this case, the placement agreement is not purchasing the securities from the issuer as in a negotiated or competitive offering, but is selling directly for a municipal issuer. And there are typically restrictions based on the securities issued through a private offering regarding the sale by investors, so that they are required to be provided a private placement letter outlining the rules. Advance refunding. Advance refunding is when the municipality issues new bonds. Refunded issue to pay off the outstanding bonds. Refunded issue. In order to meet with tax laws, the refunded issue must remain outstanding for more than 90 days after the issuance of the refunded issue. Current refunding is when the municipal securities will be redeemed or mature within 90 days or less of the date of issuance and the refunded issue. Usually, the money received from the sale of the refunded issue is invested in U.S. Treasury securities or U.S. government agency securities. The principal and interest from the U.S. Treasury or U.S. government securities is issued to pay principal and interest on the refunded issue. Another method of advance refunding is called crossover refunding. Crossover refunding is when the revenue stream, which was originally pledged to pay debt service on the refunded bonds, continues to be used to pay principal and interest on those bonds until they mature or are called. Until that happens, those pledged revenues cross over and are used to pay principal and interest on the refunded issue, and escrow securities are used to pay the refunded bonds. When both the revoked and refunded bonds are outstanding, the debt service on the refunded bonds is paid from the interest earnings on the money invested by the municipality from the sale of the refunded issue. In some cases, the issuer may offer a direct exchange of securities, exchanging the called or mature bonds to the issuer of the bonds to their existing bondholders versus selling new securities. This will help keep costs lower for the issuer because they don't have to market the new securities, pay underwriters, or pay costs for transferring money or securities. Escrow requirements. Pre-refunded bonds may be escrowed to maturity, meaning that the proceeds of the sale from the new issue of bonds is held in an escrow account. Typically, the money held in the escrow account is invested in securities with a high credit rating, such as U.S. Treasury securities. The interest and the principal received in the escrow account will be used to make principal and interest payments to the bondholders. Call features. No matter the type of offering, like corporate bonds, municipal bonds may be issued with call repayment provisions. As such, there are a wide variety of ways municipal bonds can be called. Par or premium. Typically, bonds are called or redeemed at par or an accredited value. In the case of original issue discount, OID bonds, or zero coupon bonds, plus accrued bonds interest up to the redemption date. However, in many cases, they may be called or redeemed above par or accredited value, plus accrued interest up to the redemption date, which is called a premium call. Optional. This provision gives the holders the right or option to redeem their bonds on or after a specified date determined by the issuer. Typically, that date is set at least 10 years from the issue date. Mandatory. Mandatory redemptions occur at either on a scheduled basis in specified amounts or in amounts then on deposit in the sinking fund, or based on when a certain amount of money is available in the sinking fund. Sinking fund call. Partial or in whole call. Depending on the terms of the bond contract, the issuer may make an in whole call, where all the callable bonds of that issue must be redeemed, or a partial call, where only a portion of the issue must be redeemed. Sinking fund. Issuers of callable bonds often set up sinking bonds, which are where the issuer puts money aside to pay off bonds at some future date. Once there is enough money in the sinking fund to redeem the bonds, there will be a mandatory sinking fund call. Extraordinary calls. These are mandatory or optional redemptions due to an extraordinary event such as a loss of revenue producing facility backing the bonds. The loss could be due to a hurricane, flooding, fire damage, loss to eminent domain, etc. Make whole calls. This type of call provision allows the issuer to pay off the debt securities early but at a higher expense. In the case of make whole calls, the issuer must make a lump sum payment based on the net present value of future interest payments that would be due on the bonds that will not be paid due to the bonds being called. Because of the high cost of the municipality, bonds with make whole call provisions are rarely issued. Callable bonds are riskier for investors because they aren't sure how long they're going to be able to hold their assets, and barring a catastrophe, issuers usually call their bonds when interest rates drop so that they can issue new bonds with a lower coupon rate. So the benefit to issue is that they won't be stuck making high coupon payments when interest rates fall. The benefit to investors is that they receive a higher coupon rate on callable bonds. Here we'll examine callable bond benefits and risk. By benefit and risk. Investor. Benefit is higher coupon rate. The risk is may not be able to keep the bond as long as wanted, and if a bond is called, may have to invest at a lower coupon rate if the bonds are called. Issuer. The benefitors may call the bonds at a time that's beneficial and can issue the bonds with a lower coupon rate. The risk is making higher coupon payments than non-callable bonds. Although much more rare, municipal securities may also be issued with put or tender options. These are rarer because it puts more control in the hands of the investors and takes some of the control away from the issuers. Put options give the investors the right to require the issuer or agent of the issuer, tender agent, to purchase their bonds, usually at par value at certain times prior to the maturity date. Typically, puttable bonds are variable rate securities, with the put option exercisable on dates on which the floating variable rate changes. Put options give investors more control, but usually at the cost of lower interest rate than non-puttable security. Examining other types of municipal bonds on the test. Along with standard revenue and go bonds, you're required to know the specifics of the following bonds. Special tax bonds. These bonds are secured by one or more taxes other than ad valorem property taxes. These bonds may be backed by sales taxes on fuel, tobacco, alcohol, and so on. Special assessment, special district bonds. These bonds are issued to fund the construction of sidewalks, streets, sewers, and so on. Special assessment bonds are backed by taxes only on the properties that benefit from improvements. In other words, if people who live a few blocks away from you get all new sidewalks, they'll be taxed for it, not you. Double barrel bonds. These bonds are basically a combination of revenue and go bonds. Municipalities issue these bonds to fund revenue producing facilities, toll bridges, water and sewer facilities, and so forth. But if the revenues taken in aren't enough to pay the debt, tax revenues make up the deficiency. Lease revenue bonds. These bonds are secured by lease rental payments made by the party leasing the facilities that finance the bond issue. Usually, lease revenue bonds are used to finance construction of facilities used by a state or municipality. These facilities include schools and office buildings. Certificates of Participation, COP. These are similar to a lease revenue bond, but instead of the bondholders receiving the interest payments from the municipal issuer, they receive a share in a pledged revenue stream, usually lease payments paid by the lessor to a trustee, who then distributes pro rata shares to each of the bondholders. Limited tax general obligation bonds, LT-GO. These bonds are types of general obligation bonds for which the taxes backing the bonds are limited. Limited tax general obligation bonds are secured by all revenues of the municipality that aren't used to back other bonds. However, the amount of property taxes municipalities can levy to back these bonds are limited. If the bond is backed by an unlimited tax pledge, the municipality can raise property tax rates to make sure the bonds are able to be paid off, which is good for investors but bad for homeowners. Public Housing Authority bonds, PHAs. These bonds are also called New Housing Authority bonds, NHAs, and are issued by local housing authorities to build and improve low-income housing. These bonds are backed by U.S. government subsidies, and if the issuer doesn't pay off the debt, the U.S. government makes up any shortfalls. Because PHAs are backed by the issuer and the U.S. government, they are considered among the safest municipal bonds. Because PHAs are backed by the issuer and the U.S. government, they're considered among the safest bonds. Moral obligation bonds. These bonds are issued by a municipality but issued by a pledge from the state government to pay off debt if the municipality can't. Given this additional backing by the state, they're considered safe. Moral obligation bonds need legislative approval to be issued. Because they're called moral obligation bonds, the state has a moral responsibility but not a legal obligation to help pay off the debt if the municipality can. The following question tests your ability to answer questions about the safety of municipal bonds. From an issuer standpoint, rate the following municipal bonds in order from safest to riskiest. 1. Revenue bonds. 2. Moral obligation bonds. 3. Public housing authority bonds. 4. Industrial development revenue bonds. A. 1, 2, 3, 4. B. 3, 2, 1, 4. C. 2, 3, 1. C. 2, 3, 4, 1. D. 2, 4, 3, 1. The correct answer is choice B. If you remember that public housing authority bonds are considered the safest of the municipal bonds because they're backed by U.S. government subsidies, this question is easy because only one answer starts with 3 anyway. Public housing authority bonds would be the safest. Moral obligation bonds, which are also considered very safe because the state government has a moral obligation to help pay off the debt if needed, follow. Next come revenue bonds, which are backed by a revenue producing facility. Remember that industrial development revenue bonds are considered the riskiest municipal bonds because although they're technically municipal bonds, they're backed only by lease payments made by a corporation. Municipal bond diversity of maturities. The diversity of maturities hopefully will look familiar to you because it was covered in the Security Industry Essentials exam. Not only can bond certificates be in different forms, but they can also be scheduled with different types of maturities. Maturity schedules depend on the issuer's needs. Most municipalities issue either term bond or serial bonds. The following list represents an explanation of the types of bond issues and maturity schedules. Term bonds. Term bonds are all issued at the same time and have the same maturity date. For example, if a corporation or municipality issues $20 million of term bonds, they may all mature in 20 years. Because of the large payment that's due at maturity, most corporations and municipalities issuing this type of bond have a sinking fund. Corporations typically issue term bonds because they lock in a coupon rate for a long period of time. The issuer creates a sinking fund when it sets aside money over time in order to retire its debt. Investors like to see that a sinking fund is in place because it lowers the likelihood of default, the risk that the issuer can't pay interest or par value back at maturity. Series bonds. These bonds are issued in successive years that have only one maturity date. Issuers of series bonds pay interest only on the bonds that they've issued so far. Construction companies that are building developments in several phases issue this type of bond. Because this type of bond is issued mainly by construction companies, they are usually not issued by municipalities. Serial bonds. In this type of bond, a portion of the outstanding bonds mature at regular intervals. For example, 10% of the entire issues mature yearly. Serial bonds are usually issued by corporations and municipalities to fund projects to provide regular income streams. Most municipal local government bonds are issued with serial maturity. A serial bond that has more bonds maturing on the final maturity date is called a balloon issue. Specific types of municipal securities. Municipalities can certainly offer a wide variety of ways to issue securities. Below you'll find the ways that they'll be tested on the Series 7. For the most part, the names pretty much explain what they are, but you should listen on to get a deeper understanding. Original issue discount bonds. An original issue discount bond, or OID, is a bond that was originally issued at a discount and matures at par value. The difference between the original purchase value and par value price must be adjusted over the life of the bond and is treated as federally tax-free interest. If selling a bond before maturity, you have to take the adjusted book value and compare it to the selling price to determine if there is a gain or loss. OIDs may also receive semi-annual interest payments. OIDs that don't receive interest payments are considered zero coupon bonds. Zero coupon bonds. Zero coupon bonds are a type of original issue discount bond that receives no interest payments. These bonds are issued at a deep discount and mature at par value. These bonds must be accredited over the life of the bond until the reaching face value at maturity. For municipal securities, the annual accretion is considered federally tax-free interest. Capital appreciation bonds, CABs. The issuers of these municipal bonds reinvest the principal amount received from issuing the bonds at a stated compounded rate until maturity. At maturity, investors receive the maturity value, which represents the initial principal amount and the total investment return. CABs are different from zero coupon bonds because the investment return is in the form of compounded interest instead of the accredited original value. CABs are sold at a deeply discounted price with maturity values and multiples of 5,000. Variable rate securities. These securities have interest rates that fluctuate in response to market movements. Variable rate securities are also known as floating rate securities. The floating or variable rate is set at specified intervals, as the auction rate securities. Because the interest rate is reset occasionally, the market price of the security tends to remain more stable. Variable rate securities typically have initial maturities of 10 years or more. Auction rate securities. These are municipal bonds where the interest rate is reset periodically based on a Dutch auction. A Dutch auction is a process by which new securities are sold at the best bid price, which translates to the lowest yield in the issuer, highest selling price, and or lowest coupon rate. Because the coupon rate is reset periodically, the prices of auction rate securities are more likely to remain stable when interest rates change. Taxable municipal bonds. Although the interest on municipal bonds is federally tax-free and sometimes triple tax-free, the interest is exempt from federal, state, and local taxes. There are some that you need to be aware of that are taxable. These bonds are still used and backed by a municipality, but are still taxable. These bonds were created under the Economic Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009 and are called Build America bonds. The idea behind the BABs is to help municipalities raise money for infrastructure projects such as tunnels, bridges, roads, etc. These bonds have a higher coupon rate than most other municipal bonds because the maturity receives tax credits from the federal government, or are more attractive because the investors receive tax credits from the federal government. As such, these municipal bonds become more attractive to all investors, even ones with lower income tax rates. Even though the Build America bond program expired in 2010, there are still plenty of these bonds out there, so you will be tested on them. Two types of Build America bonds are tax credit BABs. Investors of this type of Build America bonds receive tax credits equal to 35% of the coupon rate. Direct payment BABs. When a municipality issues direct payment BABs, it receives reimbursements from the U.S. Treasury equal to 35% on the coupon rate. As such, direct payment BABs would tend to have a higher coupon rate than tax credit BABs. Don't forget municipal notes. When municipalities tend to the short-term interim financing, municipal notes come into play. These notes bring money into the municipality until other revenues are received. Municipal rates typically have maturities of 1 year or less, usually 3 to 5 months. Know the different types of municipal notes for the Series 7 exam. Tax anticipation notes, TANs. These notes provide financing for the current operations in anticipation of future taxes that the municipality will collect. Revenue anticipation notes, RANs. These bonds provide financing for current operations in anticipation of future revenues that the municipality will collect. Tax and receiving anticipation notes, TRANs. These notes are a combination of TANs and RANs. Grant anticipation notes, GANs. These bonds provide interim financing for the municipality while it's waiting for a grant from the U.S. government. These notes are paid off from the grant funds once received. Bond anticipation notes. These bonds provide interim financing for the municipality while it's waiting for long-term bonds to be issued. Construction loan notes, CLNs. These notes provide interim financing for the construction of multiple family buildings. Project notes. These notes provide interim financing for the building of subsidized housing for low-income families. Tax-exempt commercial paper. These short-term bonds are usually issued by organizations such as universities with permission of the government. This debt obligation usually lasts only a few months to help the organization cover short-term liabilities. AON, all or none, is an order qualifier filling entire order at a specific price or not at all, or a type of underwriting. It is not a municipal note, no matter how much it looks like one. Municipal notes are not rated the same as municipal or corporate bonds, AAA, AA, A, and so on. Municipal notes have rating as follows, from best to worst. Moody's, MIG1, MIG2, MIG3, MIG4, Standard & Poor's, SP1, SP2, SP3, Fitch, F1, F2, F3. The following question tests your knowledge of municipal notes. Suffolk County, New York, would like to even out its cash flow. Which of the following notes would Suffolk County most likely issue? A, RANs, B, BANs, C, GANs, D, TANs. The answer that you want is D. You have to use a little common sense to answer this one. Because the question doesn't state that the municipality is expecting to grant or issuing long-term bonds, you should cross out choices B and C. Likewise, you can't assume that the municipality will be collecting revenues from some project, so choice A is out. However, municipalities collect property taxes at regular intervals, so D is the best choice. Municipality securities diversification. As with other securities, you can also help customers diversify their municipality's portfolio. By diversifying with different types of municipal securities, it adds an extra degree of safety. The ways to diversify in municipalities are geographical, by investing in different areas of the country. Investors limit their risk that a particular area of a country, a particular state, and or a particular local municipality may be experiencing trouble making regularly scheduled interest payments. Municipalities may have trouble paying their debt due to poor management, economic downturns, natural disasters, and so on. Type varying the type of municipal securities purchased, such as gold bonds, revenue bonds, municipal bonds, short-term and long-term maturities, etc., provides investors with a certain degree of safety while attempting to take advantage of higher interest rates on riskier investments. Rating. Investors can also diversify by purchasing bonds with different ratings. Certainly, the ones with higher ratings had most credit worthiness. However, bonds with higher ratings have lower coupon interest rates. Therefore, investors may decide to purchase bonds with different ratings to try to get a higher return on the lower rated bonds, but also provide some safety by purchasing some higher rated bonds. As with the coupon bonds, the main rating services for municipal bonds are Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch. When a municipality issues its municipal securities, which is known as credit enhancement, it increases the rating of the bond issue and allows the issuer to offer the securities with a lower coupon rate. Municipal fund securities. Municipal fund securities are similar to investment companies, but are exempt from definition under Section 2B of the Investing Company Act of 1940. Municipal fund securities are established by municipal governments, municipal agencies, or educational institutions, but do not represent loans to the government. Included in municipal bond and municipal fund securities are Section 529 plans, able accounts, and local government investment pools. Section 529 plans. 529 plans are specialized educational savings accounts available to investors. These plans are also known as qualified tuition plans, QTPs, because they are designed to allow money to be saved for qualified expenses for higher education in colleges, post-secondary, trade, and vocational schools, postgraduate programs, etc. As such, there is an owner, the one who sets up and contributes to the plan, typically a parent, but doesn't have to be, and a beneficiary, the one who benefits from the plan, typically a child or relative of the person who set up the plan. Contribution allowance varies from state to state and is made from after-tax dollars. However, withdrawals of the amount invested plus interest received are tax-free, meaning that the earnings grow on a tax-deferred basis, and there is no tax due if used for qualified educational expenses. Investors must receive an official statement or offering circular to open the account. You should note the following. Contribution levels vary from state to state. Rollovers are allowed once every 12 months. An investor may roll over the funds from one state's 529 plan to another state's plan or to Coverdale ESA. The investor may change investment plans offered by the plan up to twice a year. There aren't any income limits placed on the investors of a 529 plan. Many investors contribute monthly, although not required. Any account balances that are unused, like suppose the beneficiary decides not to go to college or goes to a cheaper local college can be transferred to another related beneficiary. The assets in the account always remain under control of the donor, even after the beneficiary becomes of legal age, which is 18 in most states. In some cases, plans can be set up as prepaid tuition plans, which allows investors to prepay college at a locked-in rate, or a college savings plan, which allows the owners to invest as they see fit, aggressively, moderately, or conservatively. As with securities, there are disclosure requirements. When you're promoting 529 plans, you should discuss the risk and costs associated with different types of plans. Recommend that they check out the tax benefits in their home state and provide a disclaimer stating that the customer should read the disclosure document associated with the investment. If money is withdrawn for a non-qualified reason, the IRS may assess a 10% tax penalty. Up until recently, 5-2 plans were only allowed to be set up for higher education. However, due to new tax laws, 5-2 plans may be set up for private kindergartens through 12th grade education. If a 529 plan is set up for K through 12 education, the maximum contribution is $10,000 per year per beneficiary. ABLE accounts. ABLE, Achieving a Better Life Experience accounts, are designed for individuals with provable disabilities and their families. Because of the extra needs and expenses, educational, housing, transportation, health, assistive technology, legal fees, etc., required for taking care of individuals with disabilities. ABLE accounts allow people to invest after tax dollars. Any earnings or distributions are tax-free as long as they are used to pay for qualified disability expenses for the beneficiary. ABLE accounts may be opened by the eligible individual, a parent or guardian, or a person granted power of attorney on behalf of the individual with the disability. However, once the account is open, anyone can contribute. As with college savings plans above, the investments may be conservative, moderate, or aggressive. Many states have annual contribution caps and maximum account balances. ABLE accounts may be open for a disabled person even if they are receiving other benefits such as Social Security, disability, Medicaid, private insurance, etc. In order to be eligible, the onset of the disability must have been discovered before the individual reached age 26. Rule G45. Rule G45 requires dealers underwriting ABLE programs or 529 savings plans, but not LGIPs, to submit information such as plan descriptive information, asset allocation information for each plan available, contributions, performance data, and so on, and performance data annually through the through the electronic municipal market access system. MSRB's EMA system is designed to provide market transparency to help protect market participants. Local government investment pools. Local government investment pools, LGIPs, are established by states to provide either government entities to provide other government entities, cities, counties, school districts, and so on with a short-term investment vehicle for investing their funds. Since these are set up by the state governments for state entities, LGIPs are exempt from SEC regulation. As such, there is no prospectus requirement, but they do have disclosure documents to cover investment policies, operating procedures, etc. Although they aren't money market funds, they are similar in the fact that many LGIPs operate similar to one. Like money market funds, the NAV is typically set at $1, and normally the money is invested safely, although it doesn't have to be. LGIPs may be sold directly to municipalities or through municipal advisors hired by the municipal issuers. Municipal fund securities investment advertisements. Municipal fund securities advertisements. As with other securities, there are rules related to the advertising of municipal fund securities, such as 529 plans. Advertisements related to municipal fund securities must do the following: remind investors to review the investment objectives, expenses, and risk involved with particular municipal fund security prior to investing. Disclose that an official statement relating to the municipal fund security will provide additional information, and the official statement should be read and understood prior to investing. Name the firm as an underwriter if it publishes the advertisement, and will also supply the official statement, are all under municipal fund security advertisements. The beneficiary of a 529 plan may live in another state, so advertisement related to 529 savings plans must tell investors to also take into consideration the rules and tax benefits of beneficiaries' home prior to investing. Understanding the taxes on municipal bonds. Municipal bonds typically have lower yields than most other bonds. You may think that because U.S. government securities, T-bills, T-notes, T-bonds, and so on, are the safest of all securities, they should have the lowest yields. Not so, because municipal bonds have a tax advantage that U.S. government bonds don't have. The interest received on municipal bonds is federally tax-free, comparing municipal and corporate bonds equally. The taxable equivalent yield, TEY, tells you what the interest rate of a municipal bond would be if it weren't federally tax-free. You need the following formula to compare municipal bonds and corporate bonds equally. Write this down. Taxable equivalent yield, TEY, equals municipal yield divided by 100% minus investor's tax bracket. Because the investor's tax bracket comes into play with municipal bonds are better suited for investors in higher tax brackets. The following question tests your ability to answer a TEY question. Alyssa K is an investor who is in the 30% tax bracket. Which of the following securities will provide Alyssa with the best after-tax yield? A. 5% gold bond. B. 6% T-bond. C. 7% equipment trust bond. Or D. 7% mortgage bond. The right answer is choice A. If you were to look at what I just said, or listen, without considering any tax advantages, the answer would be either C or D. However, you have to remember that the investor has to pay federal taxes on the interest received from the T-bond, equipment bond, and mortgage bond, but doesn't have to pay federal taxes on the interest received from the GO municipal bond. So you need to set up the TEY equation to be able to compare all the bonds equally. Taxable equivalent yield equals municipal yield divided by 100% minus investor's tax bracket, which equals 5% divided by 100% minus 30%, which equals 5 over 70%, which equals 7.14%. Looking into Series 7 examiner's heads, you have to ask yourself, why would they be asking me this question? Well, because they want to make sure that you know that the interest received on municipal bonds is federally tax-free. Therefore, if you somehow forget the formula, you're still likely to be right if you pick a municipal bond as the answer when you get a question like the preceding one. Note, although this situation is less likely, the Series 7 may ask you to determine the municipal interest yield, MEY, which is the yield on the taxable bond after paying taxes. Once you have that yield, you can compare it to a municipal bond to help determine the best investment for one of your customers. The following for the municipal equivalent yield is as follows. Municipal yield times 100 minus investor's tax bracket. Scot-free, taking a look at triple tax-free municipal bonds. Bonds that the U.S. territories and federal districts issue are triple tax-free. The interest rate is not taxed on federal, state, or local level. These places include Puerto Rico, Guam, U.S. Virgin Islands, American Samoa, and Washington, D.C. Additionally, in most cases, There are a few exceptions. If you buy a municipal bond issued within your own state, the interest will be triple tax free. Unless you see the U.S. territories or Washington, D.C. in a municipal bond question, don't assume that the bonds are triple tax free. Even if the question states that the investor buys a municipal bond issued within their own state, don't assume that it's triple tax free unless the question specifically states that it is. The tax advantage of municipal bonds applies only to interest received. If investors sell municipal bonds for more than their cost basis, the investors have to pay taxes on the capital gains. Pricing municipal securities and other mathematical calculations. You'll find that I cover a lot of this stuff in the earlier chapter. Some of the calculations that you'll be responsible for include dollar price, accrued interest including long or short, first coupons, also known as odd first coupons, relationship of bond prices to changes in maturity, coupon, current yield, etc. The following sections describe some of the other pricing and mathematical calculations you'll need to know for the Series 7. YTC on premium bonds. There is an inverse relationship between rates and bond prices. As interest rates increase, outstanding bond prices decrease. When interest rates decrease, outstanding bond prices increase. So when municipal bonds are trading at a premium above par value, it is usually because interest rates have dropped or the municipality's credit rating increased. Anyway, to the municipal issuer, this means that it can now issue new bonds with a lower coupon rate and save some money. Because it is likely in this scenario that the municipal issuer will call this callable bonds when interest rates decrease. Callable bonds trading at a premium must be quoted yield to call, YTC, instead of yield to maturity, YTM. Value of a basis point. A basis point is a unit of measurement when quoting and comparing yields on all bonds or notes. Basis points are 1/100th of a point. For example, if the yield on the bond increased from 3.25 to 3.27%, is referred to as a 2 basis point increase. Occasionally, an issuer may default on its bonds. This means that issuer is no longer making interest payments. If a bond is traded in default, there is no way to calculate yields. For bearer coupon bonds, all unpaid coupons must be attached in order to be considered good delivery. Municipal bond quotations. Municipal bonds may be quoted on a yield basis, price, or on a dollar price. To figure out if the yield basis price, YTM price, please refer to the previous recording. For municipal bonds quoted as a dollar price, remember that it is a percentage of dollar price. So $1,000 par value municipal bond quoted at 98 means that the bond is usually trading at a price of $980, 98% of $1,000 par. However, although some municipal bonds may be available with par values of $1,000, most trade in minimal denominations of $5,000, and many have minimum denominations as high as $25,000 or $100,000 to attract institutional investors. What is the actual dollar price of a $5,000 par value municipal bond trading at 99? A. 99. B. $990. C. $4,950. D. $5,000. The answer you want is choice C. This question is relatively easy if you remember that the 99 in the question is a percentage of the par value. So the $5,000 face value bond is not actually trading at $99. You can use the following equation to get your answer. $5,000 face value times 99% equals $4,950. Interest rate. Remember that if the interest rate coupon rate is based on a percentage of par value, an investor with a 4% municipal bond with a par value of $25,000 will receive annual interest of $1,000. 4% times $25,000 par. Since most bonds pay semi-annual interest, this investor will receive $500 every 6 months. For another calculation, you may be asked to determine the number of days of accrued interest if a bond is traded in between coupon dates. Accrued interest is covered in detail in the previous recording. However, don't forget that accrued interest on municipal bonds is calculated using 30-day months instead of actual days, following the municipal rules. Following the municipal bond rules. Yes, unfortunately, the Series 7 tests you on rules relating to municipal bonds. Rules are a part of life and a part of the Series 7 exam. A lot of the rules related to municipal securities were already covered on the Securities Industry Essentials exam. This section covers just a few rules that are specific to municipal securities. And if you're itching for more regulations, don't worry. You'll see them in a later date. Confirmations. All confirmations are trades. All confirmations of trades, MSRB Rule G-15, must be sent or given to customers at or before the completion of the transaction. Settlement date. Municipal securities settled the regular way 2 business days after the trade date of T+2. The following items are included on the confirmation: the broker-dealer's name, address, and phone number. The capacity of the trade, whether the firm acted as a broker or dealer. The dollar amount of the commission if the firm's acting as a broker. The customer's name. Any bond particulars such as the issuer's name, interest rate, maturity, call features, if any, and so on. A trade date, time of execution, and settlement date. Committee on Universal Securities Identification Procedures. Identification number, or CUSIP number, if there is one. Bond yield and dollar price. Any accrued interest. The registration form, registered as to principal only, book entry, or fully registered. Whether the bonds have been called or pre-refunded. Any unusual facts about the security. Advertising and record keeping. A brokerage fund has to keep all advertising for a minimum of 3 years, and these ads must be easily accessible, not in a bus storage locker, for at least 2 years. The Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board, MSRB, requires a principal manager to approve all advertising material of the firm prior to its first use. The principal must ensure that the advertising is accurate and true. Advertising includes any material designed for use in the public media. Advertising includes offering circulars, marketing firm letters, summaries of official statements, and so on. However, preliminary and final statements are not considered advertising because they're prepared by the issuer, and therefore they don't require approval from a principal. Commissions. Although no particular guideline states what percentage brokers and dealers can charge, all commission, markups, and markdowns must be familiar and reasonable, and policies can't discriminate among customers. The items that firms should consider follows: the market value of the securities at the time of the trade, the local dollar amount of the transaction. Although you're going to see more money for a larger transaction, the percentage charge is usually lower. The difficulty of the trade. If you had to jump through hoops to make sure the trade was completed, you're entitled to charge more. The fact that you and the firm that you work for are entitled to make a profit, which of course is the reason you got involved in the business to begin with. You can't take race, ethnicity, religion, gender, sexual orientation, disability, age, funny accents, or how much you like or dislike the client into account. G, even more rules. Even though a lot of G rules were covered in the security industry essentials exam, FINRA obviously decided that you should know even more. The following list isn't as huge as it could be because many of the rules are already covered throughout this recording. However, you're not expected to know the minute details of each rule, it's just the main idea. Fortunately, many of them just make sense. Also, don't worry about the rule numbers, pay more attention to the rule. Rules G8 and G9, books and records requirements. All brokers, dealers, and municipal securities dealers must keep records regarding municipal securities business. Among the many items they have to keep are the following: records of original entry, blotters, itemized daily records of all purchases and sales of municipal securities, account records for each customer account, securities records, separate records showing all municipal securities positions, subsidiary records of municipal securities and transfer municipal securities borrowed or loaned, municipal securities transactions not completed by the settlement date, etc., put options and repurchase agreements, records for agency transactions, records concerning primary offerings, copies of confirmations, customer account information, customer complaints, records concerning political contributions. You aren't expected to remember the entire list, just get a general feeling for what's required. It looks like the MSRB wants a broker-dealer or a municipal securities dealer to maintain records of just about everything. Rule G9, preservation of records. MSRB's record-keeping requirements are very similar to, but not exactly the same as FINRA's requirements. Most records have to be kept either 4 or 6 years to keep you from pulling your hair out. Look at the record keeping requirements by listening, where I know how MSRB rules and FINRA rules are different later on in another recording. Rule G11, primary office practices. During the underwriting of new municipal securities, the underwriting syndicate may set up a system for allocation of orders, which orders get filled first. In addition, it must indicate conditions that might change the priority for the allocation of orders. Rule G12, uniform practice. Rule G12 was established to create a uniform practice between municipal security broker-dealers and how to handle transactions. Included are settlement dates, good delivery requirements, how to handle mutilated certificates, and so on. Rule G13, quotations. According to MSRB rules, all quotations for municipal securities published or distributed by any broker-dealer, municipal securities dealer, or person associated with a broker-dealer or municipal securities dealer must be bona fide. G17, conduct of municipal securities and municipal advisory activities. Municipal securities broker-dealers, municipal securities dealers, municipal advisors, agents, etc. shall deal fairly with all persons and not engage in dishonest, deceptive, or unfair practice. Rule G19, suitability of recommendations and transactions. As with other securities, broker-dealers and municipal securities, prior to recommending municipal securities to a customer, must have a reasonable basis to believe that the recommendation is appropriate for the customer. Brokers or dealers must make sure that the recommendation fits the customer's investment profile. Included in that profile should be the customer's age, other investments, risk tolerance, tax situation, financial situation, investment experience, time horizon, liquidity needs, and so on. Rule G21, advertising. Advertisements by municipal securities, dealers, brokers, and dealers can't contain false or misleading statements. Advertisements include published material used in electronic or other public media, promotional literature, written or electronic, made available to customers or the public, circulars, market letters, seminars, texts, press releases, and so on. However, preliminary official statements, offering circulars, and so on are not considered advertisements. Rule G27, supervision. All firms selling municipal securities must have a designated principal to oversee the firm's representatives. In addition, all firms selling municipal securities must create and update as needed a written supervisory procedures manual. Principals are responsible for approving and writing the opening of new customer accounts, each municipal securities transaction, the handling of customer complaints and actions taken, and correspondence relating to municipal securities trades. Rule G28, transactions with employees and partners of other municipal securities professionals. When an employee of a municipal securities firm opens an account of another municipal securities firm, the municipal securities firm opening the account must notify the employing firm in writing. Besides notifying the employing firm, duplicate confirmations must be sent to the employing firm along with complying with any other requests from the employing firm. Rule G30, pricing and commissions. If buying or selling municipal securities for a customer or principal basis for or from the dealer's inventory. The aggregate price dealing the markdown or markup must be fair and reasonable. If selling or buying municipal securities on an agency basis for a customer, the broker-dealer is responsible for making a reasonable effort to obtain the best price for the customer, and the commission charge must be fair and reasonable in relation to prevailing market conditions. G32, disclosures in connection with primary offers. When a client purchases a new issue of municipal securities, the client must receive an official statement at or prior to the delivery. If the municipal underwriting was done on a negotiated basis where the lessor chose the underwriter directly, the municipal firm must disclose the initial offering price, the spread, and any fee received as a result of the transaction. If the underwriting was done on a competitive bidding basis, the spread does not need to be disclosed. Rule G34, CUSIP members' new issue and market information requirements. For new issues of municipal bonds, whether negotiated or competitive offerings, the managing underwriters must apply to the CUSIP to receive identification numbers for the bonds for each maturity, if more than one. For negotiated offerings where the underwriters are chosen directly, the managing underwriter must apply prior to the pricing of the new municipal issue. For competitive offerings, the managing underwriter must apply after winning the bid. In the event that the municipal issuer hired an advisor, the municipal advisor must apply no later than the business day after the notice of sale is published. Rule G38, solicitation of municipal securities business. Brokers, dealers, or municipal securities dealers may not provide or agree to provide payment for solicitation of municipal securities business to any person who is not affiliated with the broker, dealer, or municipal securities dealer. Gathering more municipal bond info. As with other investments, you need to be able to locate information if you're going to sell municipal securities to investors. You may find that information about municipal bonds is not as readily available as it is for most other securities. Some municipal bonds are relatively thin issues. Not many are sold or traded, or may be of interest only to investors in a particular geographic location. This section reviews some of the information that you have to know to ace the Series 7 exam. The bond resolution indenture. The bond resolution indenture provides investors with contract terms, including the coupon rate, years until maturity, collateral backing the bond, if any, and so on. Although not required by law, almost every municipal bond comes with a bond indenture, which is printed on the face of many municipal bond certificates. It makes the bonds more marketable because the indenture serves as a contract between the municipality and the trustee who's appointed to protect the investor's rights. Included in the indenture are the flow of the funds and any assets that may be backing the issue. Legal opinion. Printed on the face of municipal bond certificates, the legal opinion is prepared and signed by a municipal bond counsel attorney. The purpose of the legal opinion is to verify that the issue is legally binding on the issuer and conforms to tax laws. Additionally, the legal opinion may state that the interest received from the bond is tax exempt. If a bond is stamped ex-legal, it does not contain a legal opinion. Here are the two types of legal opinion. Qualified legal opinion. The bond counsel has some reservations about the issue. Unqualified legal opinion. The bond counsel is issuing a legal opinion without reservations. Normally, you think of qualified as a good thing and unqualified as a bad thing. For legal opinions, think the opposite. Official statement. Municipal bonds don't have a prospectus. Instead, municipalities provide an official easement. As with prospectuses, official statements come in preliminary and final versions. The preliminary version of the statement doesn't include any offering price or coupon rate. The official statement is a document that the issuer prepares. It states that the bond funds will be used. It states what the funds will be used for. Provides the information about the municipality and details how the funds will be repaid. The official statement also includes the offering terms, the underwriting spread, the description of the bonds, the description of the issuer, the offering price, the coupon rate, the feasibility statement, the legal opinion. The bond buyer, which is published May through Friday every week, is a newspaper that provides information about municipal issues, including new municipal bonds. Included in the bond buyer are the following statistics and information. The visible supply, the total dollar amount of municipal bonds expected to reach the market within the next 30 days. The placement ratio, the percentage of new issues this week as compared to new issues offered for the sale the previous week. Official notice of sale. Municipalities looking to accept underwriting bids for new issues of municipal bonds publish the official notice of sale in the bond buyer. The official notice of the sale includes when and where bids can be submitted, the total amount of the sale, the amount of good faith deposit, the type of bond being offered, gold or revenue. Methods for calculating costs, net interest costs or true interest costs. Taxes backing the issue. Because GO bonds are backed by taxes paid by people living in the municipality, issues are more likely to take bids by underwriters for GO bonds than revenue bonds. The winning bid has the lowest net interest rate cost to the issuer and the lowest interest rate and or the highest purchase price. The bond buyer also offers some pretty nifty municipal bond indexes. Here they are. The 20 bond GO index, also called the bond buyer's index. This means it measures the average yield of 20 municipal go bonds with the 20 years to maturity. All these bonds have a rating of A or better. To help you remember that the bond buyer's index has 20 bonds with 20 years to maturity, remember that 2 B's equals 2 20s. The 11 Gold Bond Index. This index should be a nice, easy one for you to remember because it's an average yield of 11 bonds for the 20 bond index with a rating of AA or better. The 25 Revenue Bond Index, also called the RevDex. This index is the average yield of 25 revenue bonds with 30 years to maturity rated A or better. The Municipal Bond Index, also called 40 Bond Index. This index is the average dollar price of 40 highly traded gold and revenue bonds with an average maturity of 20 years and a rating of A or better. Additional info. Along with the bond buyer, see or listen to the preceding section. Investors and registered reps can also find additional information about municipal bonds in public newspapers, dealing offer sheets, EMA, and RTRS. EMA, Electronic Municipal Market Access, is a free, comprehensive online source of information about municipal bonds, educational materials, official statements, trade information, 529 plan disclosure documents, market information, credit ratings, and so on, and is designed specifically for retail, non-professional investors. Once an official statement has been submitted to EMA, a broker-dealer may disclose the investors or potential investors of the security how to view and print out the official statement obtained by EMA. In the event that the customer wishes the broker-dealer to send a copy of the official statement, the broker-dealer is obligated to do so. RTRS, Real-Time Reporting System, is a system operated by the MSRB where brokers and dealers can report trades of most municipal securities. As you can hear from the name of the system, real-time means that trades must be reported promptly within 15 minutes. RTRS is open on business days between the hours of 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Trades taking place outside of those hours must be reported within 15 minutes of the opening of RTRS the next business day. The transactions reported to RTRS will be used to disclose market activity, prices, and to access and assess transaction fees. The following municipal securities transactions do not have to be disclosed to RTRS. Transaction in securities without assigned CUSIP numbers. Transaction in municipal fund securities. inter-dealer transaction for principal movement of securities between dealers that are not inter-dealer transactions eligible for comparison in the clearing agency registered with the Commission.